Did you know that the Hebrew language, the original ancient very old Hebrew language, wasn't actually a language? Bet you didn't. Come on, you didn't know. Stop pretending, stop lying. You didn't know, you had no clue. We came across this quite by accident, and when we did, we were like in shock horror, because we were always taught that Hebrew is a language. The rabbis on YouTube, online, etc. all say, well, he spoke in Hebrew language. This is from the Hebrew language, and so forth. So looking at Britannica, Encyclopedia Britannica, which is over 250 years old, and we believe it's factual, as it's stated here. This article was written and fact-checked by the editors of Encyclopedia Britannica. Canaanite languages, group of northern, central or northwestern Semitic languages. This is a mixture of people. They're not one pure race, they're like hybrids. Okay, they all met in the desert as wanderers, etc. over time, and they became a tribe with certain languages, right? Which included Hebrew, Moabite, who were supposedly wiped out by God because they're so evil. These being the descendants of Lot's two daughters that got him drunk and slept with him, because where they went after Sodom and Gomorrah, there was no men, or they had husbands, but their husbands laughed at Lot and the angels that Sodom and Gomorrah was going to be destroyed, and stayed there, so they died with it. Right. They died at Sodom and Gomorrah. Okay, and Phoenician and Punic. Central or northwestern Semitic languages, including Hebrew, Moabite, Phoenician, and Punic. They were spoken in ancient times in Palestine, on the coast of Syria, and in scattered colonies elsewhere around the Mediterranean. An early form of Canaanite is attested. Okay, it's written about in the Tel Amarna letters, so it's verifiable. Around 1400 BC. Moabite, which is very close to Hebrew, is known chiefly from one inscription dating from the 8th century BC. The only living Canaanite language is Hebrew, which was revived as a spoken language in the 19th and 20th centuries. So what the hell's going on there? It was revived. Obviously, they modified it. Okay, or created it. You would say modified it as a spoken language in the 19th and 20th centuries. You could also see Hebrew language and Phoenician language. So that shock horror, right? And we decided to look further on, and we found this article on the Canaanite languages. The Canaanite languages or Canaanite dialects are one of three subgroups. Okay. Two languages have a genetic relationship and belong to the same language family. If both are descended from a common ancestor, or one is descended from the other, the term and the process of language evolution are independent of and not reliant on, etc. These are one of the three subgroups of the Northwest Semitic languages, the others being Aramaic and Ugaritic, all originating in the Levant and Mesopotamia. They are tested in Canaanite inscriptions throughout the Levant, probably in cuneiform or that language. Mesopotamia, Anatolia, and the East Mediterranean, and other. After the founding of Carthage by Phoenician colonists in coastal regions of North Africa and Iberian Peninsula, also dialects have been labelled primarily with reference to biblical geography, biblical locations. The locations, lands, and nations mentioned in the Bible are not listed here. Some locations might appear twice, each time under a different name. Hebrew, Israeli, Judean, Biblical, Samaritan, Phoenician, etc., etc. This family of languages has the distinction of being the first historically attested group of languages to use an alphabet derived from the Proto-Canaanite alphabet, the name given to the Proto-Sinaitic script, which, when found in Canaan, dating to about the 17th century BC and later, a hypothetical ancestor of the Phoenician script before some cut-off date, typically 1050 BCE. To record their writings as opposed to the far earlier cuneiform logographic, syllabic writing of the region which originated in Mesopotamia. So everything has originated from Mesopotamia, not Egypt. These extremely closely related tongues were spoken by the ancient Semitic people of the Canaan and Levant regions, an area encompassing what is today Israel, Jordan, Sinai, Lebanon, Syria, and the Palestinian territories, and also some areas of southwestern Turkey, Anatolia, western and southern Iraq, Mesopotamia, and the northwestern corner of Saudi Arabia. The Canaanites are broadly defined. Canaan was a Semitic-speaking civilization and region in the ancient Near East during the late 2nd millennium BC. Canaan had significant geopolitical importance in the late Bronze Age, Amarna period, etc. So the Canaanites are broadly defined to include the Hebrews, including Israel, etc., etc. The Edomites, the Hyksos, the Phoenicians, including the Carthaginians, Moabites, and Suteans. Although the Amorites are included among the Canaanite peoples, their language is something not considered to be a Canaanite language, but very closely related. The Canaanite language continued to be everyday spoken languages until at least the 2nd century. Hebrew, century AD, Hebrew is the only living Canaanite language today. So it's a Canaanite language. It's a living Canaanite language today. It remained in continuous use by many Jews well into the Middle Ages and up to the present day as both liturgical and literary language, and was used for commerce, it's like trade, etc. A lingua franca, or known as bridge language, common language, trade language, auxiliary language, vehicular language, or link language, a language systematically used to make communication possible between groups of people. You probably usually don't do that. Between disparate, diasporic, what's it? Spread out, scattered. Yeah, scattered across regions which are separate from its geographic place of origin. Historically, the word was used first in reference to the dispersion of Greeks in the Hellenic world, when they were called Hellenes, and later Jews after the Babylonian exile. It was used for commerce between disparate, diasporic Jewish communities. It also remained a liturgical language among Samaritans. Supposedly the Samaritans were the Assyrians, which the Jews did not like. Samaritans are an ethno-religious group who originate from the ancient Israelites, while we read that they are actually the Assyrians. They are native to the Levant and adhere to Samaritanism, an Abrahamic and ethnic religion. Hebrew was revived by Jewish political and cultural activists, particularly through the revitalization and cultivation efforts of Zionists, a national movement that espouses the establishment of and support for a homeland for the Jewish people, centered in the area roughly corresponding to what is known in Jewish tradition as the land of Israel. But Jews don't recognize that as part of Judaism. It's not a true Judaism, a form of Judaism, actually like a branch off, a knockoff, right? And they don't really like them for different reasons. Okay, Zionists throughout Europe and in Palestine, and as an everyday spoken language in the late 19th and early 20th centuries. By the mid 20th century, modern Hebrew. What's modern Hebrew? What's being spoken today? Modern Hebrew, also known as Israeli Hebrew or Israeli, and generally referred to by speakers simply as Hebrew, is the standard form of the language, Hebrew language, spoken today. Spoken in ancient times, ancient Hebrew, a member of the Canaanite branch. Okay, so as we mentioned, it was of the Canaanite language. It's a Canaanite language. It had become the primary language of the Jews of Palestine. Who exactly were the Jews of Palestine? Were they the Judeans? Or the Yahudai or Yahudians, or whatever other name that they're referred to in their language, who later on took the first two letters of that word in their language and came up with this Jews. Right? Okay. So they were the true Jews, and was later made the official language of the state of Israel. So it's modern Hebrew that's been spoken today. Israeli Hebrew, a member of the Canaanite branch of languages, right? Language. The primary modern reference book for the many extra-biblical Canaanite inscriptions, together with Aramaic inscriptions. And that's the origin of the Aramaic, a northwest Semitic language that originated from the Arameans in the ancient region of Syria and quickly spread to Mesopotamia and eastern Anatolia, where it has been continually written and spoken in different varieties for over 3 millennium, something like that. Okay? So it keeps saying in all these articles that everything originated in Mesopotamia, not Africa. Okay? Together with Aramaic inscription is the German language book, whatever that is in German. You can't really read this, we know what this is. Und means and. So it'll be Canaanite and Aramaic inscription, from which inscriptions are often referred as Chi in for a number of in. And his classifications and sources for the North Canaan, South Canaan, and other possible Canaanite languages: Philistine, Ugaritic, the Deir Allah inscription written in a dialect with Aramaic and South Canaanite characteristics; Sutayan language, a Semitic language possibly of the Canaanite branch; Amalekite, possibly a Hebraic dialect of southern Canaan, right? And so some comparisons to Aramaic, the descendants. Modern Hebrew, revived in the modern era from an extinct dialect of the ancient. Extinct, right? It was dead. No one spoke it. It was an old tongue and no one spoke it anymore. Modern Hebrew, or Israeli Hebrew, or Israeli, was revived in the modern era from an extinct or dead dialect of the ancient Israelites. Semitic speaking tribes in ancient Near East, the house of Israel, right? During the Iron Age inhabited a part of Canaan. This is actually before Jacob became Israel. His name changed by God. He becomes Israel, then he had sons and daughters, and his descendants later became known as the Israelites. This is way before that. This is in the Abrahamic era, Abraham's days, when they journeyed to Canaan. Okay, it's preserved in literature, poetry, liturgy, also known as classical Hebrew, the oldest form of the language attested in writing. The original pronunciation of biblical Hebrew is accessible only through reconstruction. Get that? The original pronunciation of biblical Hebrew is accessible only through reconstruction. It may also include ancient Samaritan Hebrew, a dialect formerly spoken by the ancient Samaritans. The main source of classical Hebrew, etc., are the Hebrew Bible, Tanakh, and inscriptions such as the Gezer calendar, or Gezer calendar, a small limestone tablet with an early Canaanite inscription discovered in 1908 by Irish archaeologist R.A. Stewart McAllister in the ancient city of Gezer, 20 miles west of Jerusalem, commonly dated to the 10th century. And Qubet Kayafa Patriarchate, also known as Elah Fortress, and in Hebrew as Hobat Kayafa, and so forth. All of the other Canaanite languages seem to have been become extinct by the early first millennium, except Punic, which survived into late antiquity, or possibly even longer. And slightly varied forms of Hebrew, etc., etc. Okay, so we've delved into that quite a bit. The Phoenician and Carthaginian expansion spread the Phoenician language and its Punic dialect to the western Mediterranean for a time, but there too it died out, although it seems to have survived longer than in Phoenicia, that country itself. And there's some references to all that information, bibliography and external links, and there's a display of all the Semitic languages. So we are going to have a look at Genesis 11 from the original ancient, very old Brita in the Aramaic, or Genesis. Okay. So we may have already covered this. So basically, Shem had some sons, who had some sons, who had some sons, and then this guy Heber, in your modern versions, is born, and he has sons, and then it leads up to Nahor, who had Terah born to him, and then he had sons and daughters, and he lived 75 years, and to him was born Abraham, Nahor, and Haran. And these are all brothers, and to Haran was born Lot. I think Terah dies in Ur of the Chaldees. So these people didn't speak Hebrew. These particular people, they spoke Chaldean. Yeah. And then they had these women from amongst their own countrymen. Right. Abraham had Sarah, etc. And it happened that Sarah was barren, she had no children, and Terah fetched his son Abraham, Haran's son, his grandson Lot, and his daughter-in-law, and the wife of Abraham his son. He went out with them from Ur of the Chaldees to go to the land of Canaan, as God directed him. And they came as far as Haran and settled there. So at this point they haven't actually got there. And at the age of Terah was 205 years, and he died in Haran, so he actually never got to Canaan, right? Okay. So here it is, folks, that they were called Hebrews, but in the ancient Aramaic, is shown here by Victor Alexander's translation in the footnotes, Hebrew comes from this name, Awer, to cross over, someone who crosses over, implying passage. So it wasn't actually the Hebrew language, it was actually, or is actually, Canaanite. See the difference? These are the people, because they crossed over, they made a journey. Yeah? They're not actually speaking the Hebrew language. They were just called that because of that reason right there. Okay. So yeah, they've revived or reconstructed this language, which is Canaanite in origin, and they're calling it Hebrew language. Okay. So if Victor Alexander is correct, which you believe he is, that the ancient Aramaic, the Tav Asheret, is the older sister language of the Tav Ivri, or the Tav Hoti. We haven't come across that one yet. It's probably what Moses learnt when being raised in the king's court as a child, the Egyptian court, right? Temple, family. He learnt that language, Tav Hoti. Hoti sounds very much like ancient Egyptian or Kemet or Medunetta. Yeah, like it sounds very close to Hotep. Interesting. So yeah, hopefully that clears that up. That they weren't actually Hebrew and they weren't actually speaking Hebrew. They were Hebrew by name because they did that journey, but didn't actually speak Hebrew. When they went into, they spoke Chaldean, Eber, etc., etc. So they obviously adopted and adapted the Canaanite language and parts of their religion. If, as Victor N. Alexander states in his statement on his website, which was down there, we revived it, resurrected it, that they had a god called El, E-L, i.e. of Elohim, El Shaddai, etc. But that was a Canaanite pagan god. Go Google it and you'll see a picture on Wikipedia of that particular idol on the right hand side of that article. Okay, so that was a Canaanite god, El, which is the article the. And the Hebrews, somebody scripted it wrong. It should be El, E-I-L. That's the real name of God in the original ancient, very old Tav Asheret or Aramaic from 800 BC and earlier. Spoken by the prophets, the Lishana Atika Saprea of the Tav Asheret, spoken by Moses, Isaac, etc., and the various prophets in the Old Testament. So hopefully that's opened your eyes to, wow, we didn't know that. We really didn't know that. Thanks for clearing that up. Okay, we're glad that we could help clear it up for you. And in return, don't forget to subscribe to us, give us a like, add your comments below. They'll be interesting, really interesting, coming from people who claim that they speak the Hebrew language, etc. And then go tell all your family friends, church friends, etc., your pastors, your reverends, etc., etc., that Hebrew wasn't actually a language, it was the name of a group of people who made a journey to Canaan. Yeah, and what they're actually speaking is a reconstructed dialect that they call Hebrew. It's actually Canaanite.